at least the work we do, there are people out there who appreciate and admire it. We are so thankful. Thank you so much.
If I cry na menyisika, edia ye mefui.
Ehifa pa na menya bosia, edia tre medwuma yimu.
Kai kra mabre, mi yebusia ato taxi fufu. Suhum Rural Bank.
Suhum Rural Bank.
Yemamu akwa baba Suhum Rural Bank. Ye won hyehyɛ ahodo bi te sɛ dwadifo abosia, ekukuro bosia, susu account, and it so wɔ savings account, me bada chain savings account, and the akeka ho. Suhum Rural Bank was 034229186. Na won so what to me aka sɛ.
Suhum Rural Bank. Ama ene mayeka una.
Suhum Rural Bank. Enti me pa minie.
Suhum Rural Bank, growing our heritage.
The average human body mass should have at least 60% water for optimal performance in any physical or mental exercise. We can help you maintain it naturally. X Natural Mineral Water. Simply natural. For bulk purchase, call 0596 273 546 or 0596 273 547. This advert is FDA approved.
Welcome back. I'm still your host, Emmanuel Wilsonjnr, and you're on the same platform as I said earlier, Politics and Beyond. This evening, we are looking at women's empowerment in Ghana's democratic landscape or governance landscape. We are looking at the progresses that we've made so far. We are looking at the challenges. Indeed, we want to even look at the relevance of us having women in the governance landscape or the democratic governance landscape. And as I indicated earlier on, today we are very privileged to have with us two strong guests. One is not a stranger at all. In fact, she's my direct boss. And I'm making reference to Dr. Bishop Susan Inti, who is the chairperson for Crusaders Against Corruption Ghana. She has so many background. And when it comes to governance issues, it is extremely dear to her heart. Doc, welcome to Politics and Beyond.
Thank you, Emmanuel.
It's been a while, and a while since we hosted you.
Yes.
And we are so privileged to have you. Anytime we see you on the stage, we know that you are coming with some firebrands.
I hope so.
So you're welcome. We also have with us Dr. Cynthia Forsen. She has the name of my elder sister, Cynthia. So Dr. Cynthia is with the Lancaster University of Ghana. I was going to say University of Ghana. Lancaster University, Ghana. Yeah. Doc, we are so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I feel very honored to be here.
And to put on record, since we started this platform, this is the first time we are having all women as guests.
Oh, that's very good.
Yes. I know she will make a comment.
That's really good. And we are 2-1 today.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Good gender,
exactly. The first woman we hosted on the show was, or we ever hosted on the show was Dr. Susan.
Okay.
And today,
wow.
And today,
I didn't even realize that.
Yes, you were the first to come on the show as a woman.
Good. Okay.
And today too, the first time to have two guests, all women, includes Dr. Susan.
I think it's a preview of things to come.
That's right.
Yes.
That's
I don't
right.
want to ask how long it's taken for a woman to come here, but we can have that discussion later.
You see, the difficulty is that we always try to, amplify the women, but most women also find it difficult to take opportunity when it comes to public exposure, and not just on set, but even holding public positions. It's really difficult. And I remember very well the late Atta Mills. He said something, and a lot of women were so angry, but that's actually the fact. He said that he was questioned as to why he is not having a lot of women in his administration. And he said that most of the women are not willing to. He said it, and it's on record. Yes. Anyway, so it is all part of what we are going to discuss this evening.
Absolutely.
And we'll look at the challenges and we'll look at all that. Yeah. So we are going to start with Dr. Cynthia. I want to start with you.
Okay.
We are looking at women's empowerment in Ghana's democratic governance landscape.
Yes.
Can you give us an overview as a country? Or probably you can even extend it a bit to as a continent, where we are, what exactly the situation is.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Right.
I'll have a look at women in the democratic governance landscape across Africa.
Right.
And when I say Africa, I mean sub-Saharan Africa. So I believe you've got my...
yes, so we can have the
slides.
PowerPoints, the slides being exhibited, and then I'm sure it will be exhibited soon.
There we go.
On the screen,
There we go. Fantastic. So I'm taking a sub-Saharan, perspective to this. Now, Africa, as we know, is quite a complex context. We are known to be rising. According to Forbes 2021, Africa is among the fastest growing regions. There's been a narrative around Africa rising over the last 2 decades, particularly in view of our very young population and the future and the possibilities that those young people can bring to the continent. We also know that we have moved away from military governments and dictatorships, although we do have a few pockets here and there. There's rising constitutionalism and democracy in Africa. In fact, in 2025, there are 10 countries on the continent that are going to be going through some form of election, either legislative or presidential election. So we've moved ahead quite a bit. In terms of the environment, we all know Africa is resource rich, whether you're talking about agricultural resources or geological resources across the continent. This slide shows you that there is no part of the African continent that does not have some form of natural resource. However, in spite of this, we still have the narrative of Africa around human rights abuses, drought, famine, hunger, poverty, disease, dictatorships, wars, and civil wars, etc., because that seems to be the narrative that suits those who tell our story for us. And although Africa is a complex continent, it's also a complex continent for women. It's a complex context for women as well. If you go onto Google, and I'll challenge you to do this. If you go onto Google and you type in the search terms Europe women work, and you click on Google Images, you'll get a variety of images. So you'll get, for example, a little bit of history of women's work. You'll get statistics around women's work. You'll get modernity, very contemporary images of women at work, and so on and so forth. Now, if you change just one of those search terms from Europe to Asia, right? And you click again, you begin to see a homogeneity in the images. Somehow, as far as Google is concerned, all Asian women are young and they work in offices.
That's right.
Right? So the narrative is getting singular at this point. What do you think you see when you change the Asia to Africa? you get.
Oh man!
Thank you. So apart from one image on there, right? As far as Google is concerned, Bishop Susan and myself don't exist in Africa.
That's right.
And that's because somebody else is telling our story for us. But the question I ask is that, is this story completely untrue? No, of course it's not. It's a partial story. Because truth be told, women in sub-Saharan Africa provide approximately 40 to 60% of our agricultural labor.
Sure.
We produce about 70% of all of Africa's food.
Yeah.
Our labor market participation is very high, 60%, higher than all regions in the world. But women in Africa are predominantly employed in the informal sector and in low-skilled jobs. In fact, women in waged employment make up only 17%, and that's the lowest in all the world, because most of us are in informal jobs on the continent. I mean, and this picture is so stark that George Monbiot in the UK Guardian in 2011 argued that if wealth was the inevitable result of hard work and enterprise, every woman in Africa would be a millionaire. So the question is, where are the women? Who holds power? How does the agenda reinforce that power? Where are the decisions being made? Are there closed spaces to women? And how can these barriers, whether they're legislative, social norms, attitudes and beliefs, how can we change these? And what strategies can be used to transform power? So the question is, where are the women decision makers?
That's right.
Well, we've had 7 female presidents on the continent and 15 female prime ministers. 22 heads of state have been women on the African continent over a period. We know that Rwandan Parliament leads the world in the number of women in Parliament. They have over 60% of their Parliament is made up of women. If you look at us in terms of the labor market, I talked about 60% of African women in the labor market. If you look at, that's higher than any region in the world. So our labor market, so it's not that we're not there. We are in the labor market. We are participating in the labor market. According to Al Jazeera, women in Africa lead the world in corporate board membership. 1 in every 4 seats, board seats in Africa is a woman. And at 25% is only North America that leads us in terms of board membership, if you look at this slide. In terms of women in senior management, 38% of women in senior management on the continent, 38% of senior management are women. So we are doing well. We are doing quite well, and a lot of progress has been made in Africa. Now, if you break this the women in parliament and the women in the labor force down into from the average into the individual countries, you'll see that Mozambique, Namibia, Rwanda, South Africa, and Tanzania all have more women in parliament than the United Kingdom. In terms of the labor force, quite a number of countries, including Ghana, have a higher number of women in the labor market or the labor force than the United Kingdom. But alas, you see the little number in pink. That's Ghana. 14.6 as of 2022, but at the recent elections we're about 15 to 16%. So we've gone up a little.
Just a little.
Yes. So on that note, I want to ask the question, how are we doing in Ghana?
Very important.
In 2025.
Question. Yeah.
How are we doing in Ghana? Well,
are you going to go on?
Yeah. I mean, we're not doing bad. We've progressed a little bit. You know, in terms of the progress that we've made, we've increased participation in politics. You know, women, there's a rising number of women in politics. We know all the notable female political figures are Hannah Tetters, Slowusus, Nano Yeleta, Utiko Japa, and of course, our first woman vice president of Ghana, Professor Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman. Amazing feat on behalf of women, and congratulations to her. In terms of legal and institutional frameworks, We've ratified all the national conventions. You know us. We will sign straight away. I mean, we don't have a problem signing. Yes. You know, CEDAW, the Maputo Protocol. Yeah. We have a national gender policy. And of course, we've passed the Affirmative Action Bill, which is now an Act 2024. There are increasing number of NGOs who are advocating for women. You know, we've got Abantu for Development, we've got the Gender Center, we've got CampFed. And of course, media platforms like this are raising awareness about women in governance.
Exactly.
We also, at the local level, have more women in district assemblies and local government units. When I say more women, okay, in 2023, women constituted 4.1%, and that was an increase of 0.3% above the 2019 levels. So we've made some progress, but that progress is very slow, particularly at the local level. So in terms of progress,
even now, at the local level, you were saying about 9,000 males.
Yes.
Or in total.
Yes.
DCEs.
So, yes. So at the local level, in terms of district level representation, we have 9,112, I believe, DCEs. Okay. And out of that, only 800 and about 800 and odd are women. And even then,
that's less than 1,000 out of the 9,000 plus.
And even then, so 91% are men and 9% are women. And even that 9%, only this 4.1% are elected. The rest are political appointed.
Oh.
Yes. So only about 249 of them, I think, are elected members.
This raises a number of questions, honestly. But the first one that comes into mind is what you talked about. Talking about women in decision making.
Yes.
If you look at the statistics, I mean, it looks like there's some positive figures out there.
Yeah.
Are we looking at numbers or we are looking at impacts?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, because a lot of the time we look at numbers. Somehow numbers are a proxy for, or participation seems to be a proxy for impact. But actually, it depends on where you're sitting within those structures.
Right.
And if you're not sitting in a place where you can actually influence decision making, then participation becomes actually paralyzes women. So what we find primarily is that the structures that are in place. Now, for example, you talked about Professor Atta Mills's comment.
Exactly.
But I think, and with all due respect and to his memory, I do believe that what we don't look at when we make comments like that is that we're not looking at the structures that are in place, the cultural, the political, the structural factors within our society that make it very difficult for women to participate and to progress.
Dr. Susan, let me come to you on this one. We talked about all the things, and I'm happy Dr. Forson ended her comment on the structure.
Yes.
Ghana, we have all the laws, as we keep saying.
Yes.
The structure here, are we looking at the legal structures? Are we looking at the moral, the cultural? What structures are, impeding or not helping us to feel the presence of the women when it comes to governance?
That's a good question, because I was having this discussion that women are part of the whole democratic process.
Right.
But, let's think about it globally. This is not just an issue that we have in this country. They have that issue in America. Sure. We saw it in the last two elections with Hillary Clinton, and we saw it with Kamala Harris. So it's not something that is common just to Ghana. It's not something that we are facing just in Ghana.
Right.
It looks like it is a global problem that we have, that we need to deal with. Some countries have been able to deal with it better in terms of they have systems that probably work in European countries where we have a leader of the Conservative Party at the moment. We have the head of, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK, who's female.
Right.
So, and they've had a number of female prime ministers in the UK. They've had a queen for, they had her for so long. So this is a problem that is global to some extent, not just Ghanaian or African. And we can see that some women have been able to get through, break that ceiling and have attained, heights. In Ghana, we've had the Chief Justice, we've had female Chief Justices, we've had female Attorney Generals, we've had the Electoral Commissioners being female.
That's right.
We now have a female VP. So there are women who are breaking that or shattering that glass ceiling, but not enough women in decision-making positions. And we can't just look at the few at the top. We need to we're looking across the whole country in terms of democracy and everybody being, having that right. It's part of our constitutional right to represent your locality or to represent your local authority, your political parties, whether it's independent or a political party. So we should have access to decision-making positions for women, but we have a challenge. And I believe, we were talking about it, I was talking with Dr. Cynthia about it earlier, that the Affirmative Action Bill was started in the 1990s. And it's only in 2024 that this bill, we're talking 3 decades, just to get that level playing field in place for women to use that to leverage into decision-making positions. That tells you the kind of terrain that we are living in. And it's a fight. And even though it's been implemented now and it's an act, we need to see it pushing the boundaries to achieving what it is supposed to be achieving, which is 30% quota in decision-making positions by 2026 and then 50% by 2030. So there's a work to be done. Who's going to do the work? That, I think, is the question.
I'm happy you've talked about that. Who is going to do the work? Today, as we speak, we have, and you rightly said it, there was a time in this country where all the key institutions were headed by women. So we had the Chief Justice, we had the Attorney General, we had the Electoral Commissioner, we even have the Speaker of Parliament, Shraj, and all of that. If you're talking about women being part of decision making, I really think that these were opportunities because they were heading key institutions in this country. Today, as we speak, we even have, as you rightly said, the Vice President being a female. And the Vice President is supposed to be the second most important person in this country. And so where the President is not available, or even if the President is available, she has all the platform to influence decisions and all that. Someone will ask the question, with all of this, why is it that we are not really feeling the impact and the presence of women when it comes to governance, particularly in this country? Doc, yes.
Yeah, so I would argue that, look, Parliament, the Vice President, myself, all of you, we sit in a particular context. Right. Now that context, so none of our institutions exist in isolation. They exist within a particular society that has particular norms and traditional gender roles, including those promoted by religion, right? What femininity is, what a woman is, how a woman should behave, where a woman should go, where a woman shouldn't go. We also have gender roles that restrict women's ability to participate in the way that they would want to.
Okay.
I'll give you just a simple example. If you're part of an organization and you're rising up in the ranks, You have 3 children at home and a husband. Decisions supposedly are made in the boardroom, but actually they're not, because they're made on the golf course.
That's true.
Now they're playing golf on Saturday morning when you are at home looking after the children.
Right.
And they're playing golf at 4 p.m. in the evening when you are taking, you have to pick up the children from school, take them home, look after them. They are making decisions in the bars at 7 p.m. in the evening when you're at home looking after your children. So the spaces where the decisions are actually made are not the spaces where the women congregate, right? That's the first thing. And don't forget that in terms of, again, going back to Professor Mills's comment, these women, or us as women, we internalize some of these structures. So we also believe and agree sometimes in terms of the structures that have been put in place. We agree, we internalize it, and we reproduce it in our actions. Okay? So, for example, politics is perceived as a dirty game or very masculine.
That's true.
Apart from that, politics is expensive, and women face huge financial hurdles in order to be able to participate. If these women don't have parity in terms of the gender pay gap, how are they going to accumulate enough money to get into a political campaign? And the kinds of things that people have to get, you're a crusader against corruption. You know what people get involved in order to be able to participate in some of these areas. So I think the structures that we have in place, our norms, our beliefs as a society, in and of itself, and we are brought up and socialized into those norms to believe that there are places that women should not be. And if they are there, they have to behave in a particular way. So you appoint a gender minister, and the media is more interested in her hairstyle than her competence.
That's true.
Meanwhile, they don't ask questions about the man's hairstyle.
Or lack of hair.
Or lack of hair, for that matter. Thank you.
Then you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that, these are the kind of challenges, these are the basic challenges that women face in Ghana. You talked about the financial capacity, to fund campaigns, finances, etc. Your war chest, as they say. Doing deals under the table so that you can get a big enough commission to fund, the war chest of your party or your campaign. Countries have done things that would support women, such as limiting or prescribing the amount of funding that can be used in parliamentary campaigns or political campaigns or presidential campaigns. So if we really, really, really were serious about affirmative action and what needs to be done in this country, Ghana, that is one of the things that we need to address. That every person, based on the Constitution, is entitled to stand for elections. And if we limit the amount of funding that can be put forward, that will ensure that there is parity across. So people will be able to vote for the people in their constituency based on credibility, based on integrity, because they haven't had to go and look for money and do devious deals to get it. So we need some legal intervention, to ensure that the level playing field for all citizens of Ghana. I'm not talking about this. Even just has to do with citizens, not just women, but women more so.
Should be giving some extra preferences. Does it lead? Sorry, I'll come to you. But does it lead to political funding? Is that something you are considering in the conversation?
Yes,
very well. Very
so
well.
if you take Senegal, for example, Senegal and South Africa, they have gender parity laws in political parties, right? So the political parties are mandated to have a certain level of representation. Rwanda has a quota for parliament, right? So we need legislation with teeth. Not legislation, we pass it and then it sits there, implementation and enforcement becomes a problem. And we need the political will of those who are in power to push this and move the agenda forward. Otherwise, we'll keep passing laws and we'll just keep sitting and complaining.
You know, I was just something that Dr. Cynthia spoke about, you know, the difference between women professionals, or, you know, if you want to be in politics, etc., and where the decision making takes place. You know, and I'm thinking, just for myself, there are times when I have to tell my colleague bishops or whatever that, listen, I have to go home. You are not a wife. I am.
Yeah,
That's true.
Do you understand? So these are real issues that we need to address, and they cannot be resolved just by conversation. It took the women going on protest marches in the UK in 1911 for them to be able to even vote. So when you think about it, there is a challenge with women representation. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to fight for the vote. They were, do you understand? So
I get it, yeah.
to bring a change, there needs to be some action.
What about those who make the argument that even when opportunities are given to the women themselves find it difficult to take the opportunities? I'm coming. just hold on, I'm coming. Because now I'm saying this, you made reference to, or you made an argument leading to political funding.
Yes.
Even before we get to that at the national level, the individual political parties that we have in this country have found a way of encouraging women to take up certain positions. For instance, they have reserved one whole position and they say that this is for women. I'm talking about women organizers position. They also go further, and this I have seen in all the political parties, including the CPP, the PNC, the NDC, the NPP, even the PPP. I saw them implementing it at a point where they say that some of them will say that if you are a woman and you want to be a chairperson or a secretary, any position other than the women organizer, some of the parties will say you are not supposed to pay for any filing fee. Some of the parties will say that you are supposed to pay 50% of the filing fee. A way of encouraging. The last checks that I did from these political parties, the argument was that, look, even with this office, you find it difficult to get a woman coming in to say that, okay, we want to take this thing. And so if from the political party's perspective at the local level, women are finding it difficult to even come out. I acknowledge the fact that we have the cultural challenges and all that. But the point I'm making is that, can we also argue that the ladies or the women themselves are also not pushing enough?
Okay. So let me ask you a question.
Right.
Do you think women are biologically wired not to want to participate?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, if they are not biologically wired to do so, if it's not a natural thing, it's clearly about socialization.
Very well.
Right? So, if it's about socialization,
Very well.
then it is about the fact that we are socialized into believing that
we should take
second place, or we shouldn't be so ambitious, or you know, if you go into that space, there are certain, if you go into a male-dominated space, there are certain challenges you are going to face.
Exactly.
Which sometimes
that's
puts the women off.
I mean, like perception.
Yes. Absolutely. Puts the women off.
Yes.
And these are about controlling cultural and social attitudes and norms about what a woman's place is.
Yes.
And that comes with education. And I have to say, we always tend to want to blame the women and say, oh, the women need to go for mentoring and education, but actually the men too.
Exactly.
Gender equality.
How do we raise our sons?
Yes. I agree.
Gender
to
equality
respect women as equal, you know, to them. Not, they might be physically weaker, but
That's
not
right.
intellectually weaker.
Weaker. Very true.
You know, so the society itself. And I have to say there are two institutions in society, at least in Ghanaian society, that I hold not responsible, but I think have a huge role to play.
Right.
Religious institutions and the media. I think those two institutions have a huge influence and a huge responsibility.
How women are portrayed in
absolutely
Ghana, and the
in the
roles
media
of women.
and the roles of women in society. And if you just scan the media and look at the way they talk about women in politics,
that's true.
And you'll see that women in politics it's not friendly at all.
Not friendly at all.
At all.
That's true. Doc, you wanted to add something to it because I saw you also.
It's about socialization,
right?
Because you'll find so many educated women who have a cultural attitude because that is the way that they were raised by their parents. And we need to ensure that our sons and our daughters are being raised in a way that they know that moving on, having impact, making decisions, being in politics is a noble task, especially when you're building a developing nation. You know, we need to work on self-esteem of girls. You know, if you read the press, you find 13-year-old girls, once they go into puberty, then we are talking about things like child marriage. We are talking about dropping out of school because somebody has to stay at home in the kitchen. You know, we see women still walking long distances to fetch water, struggling to get into politics, struggling to make ends meet. We have a lot of challenges.
That's right. Ghana is an agricultural country. The statistics that Dr. Cynthia exposed us to.
Yes.
I mean, I was really taken aback when I looked at the images. So you look at the Asia, you look at one other, and then you look at Africa, Europe, and then Africa. And the African images were more of women in the agric world or sector.
Yes.
Do we think that they being in the agric sector has a negative impact on governance? Or we think that they should have all been seen as corporate women? Then we'll say that, okay, we are making impact when it comes to women empowerment.
Can I just say that it is not about women being just in agriculture.
Very well.
If we had leaders who had a vision for raising and adding value and enriching our resources and creating manufacturing and light industries, sugarcane factories, corn factories, where we can transform raw materials into products and export, etc. You know, if you are part of a value chain, then at least you will be attracting some financial value. But the way that our systems have, or the agricultural industry in Ghana or other African countries have been left to, you know, whoever, it doesn't help the ordinary citizen or the person who is working on the land. And that gives them a negative, you know, agriculture is it's not sexy. When you go to conferences across Africa, and I went to 2 conferences, and the key to the economic transformation conference was helping people to see the value in agriculture and then transforming, you know, our raw materials into products. It's as if we have left the women in the field without providing them the transport, the roads, the resources. You know, if you are labor law, in most countries, when somebody is doing a job, you need to give them the resources they need to work. And I don't think we've done that.
Can I come in here?
Yes.
I think the question you ask actually is a reflection of the perception of women. Because if we were talking about male farmers who own the land, own the equipment and are extracting value, agricultural value from the land, we would not be thinking of the fact that just the very fact of them being in agriculture in and of itself is a negative thing.
I agree.
Right? So the issue is this, and I got asked this question by our former gender minister, Madame Otiko Jaba. Otiko asked me, she said, sorry, Madame Jaba asked me, she said, you go to Makola, a woman sells tomatoes. She sells, that's all she sells, tomatoes. She uses the proceeds from those the tomato selling to look after her 4 children, her cousin who died 4 years ago, her son, her sister's grandchild, her husband's brother's baby, the husband himself, because he's a civil servant and his pay is really bad. And she puts all these people through school all the way to university, right? What is economics? When I was in sixth form, I'm not an economist by any chance, but when I was in sixth form, I was told economics was concerned with distributing limited resources in an environment of high demand.
Exactly.
Now, this woman, this Makola woman who sells tomatoes, her entire life is about distributing limited resources in an environment of high demand. But does anybody at the local level, even let's talk about the local level, ask her, how do we do this?
That's right.
How do we distribute the limited resources we have in this environment of high demand? Why? Because she's just a Makola woman. What does she know? That's the perception.
In fact, Doc, I really appreciate that perception you are trying to communicate, because if you look at the picture, it is more of women who are laborers.
Yes.
Not women who own the land.
Entrepreneurs.
They are not entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And probably that will bring...
Most of them are.
Exactly. I mean, you can even see it from the pictures that most of them are. They are just into
Running
do
their
the labor
houses.
work, and that is it, as we call by-day workers. So they go in, work, and then they are giving what they are giving. But that brings me to the next area I want us to look at. Whether or not our leaders are taking, gender seriously. If you look at the just ended elections, we had the 2 leading political parties, the NDC and the MPP. If you look at their manifesto, the MPP actually promised what they called Women's Trade Empowerment Fund to support women-owned businesses.
Yes.
The NDC said they are in to give us Women's Development Bank. And it is also geared towards women empowerment, strengthening them, encouraging them to be at decision-making states or levels. Today, we have the NDC in office. The MPP did not win. We have over 120 days of the NDC being in office. A simple question that comes into the minds of everyone is, looking at their manifesto, looking at the challenges that confront us, looking at what they have done so far in this 120 plus days, is there hope?
Well, 120 days is a very short time.
Now it's over. I'm sure it should be like
it's a little more. Yes. I mean, a lot of promises are made in elections. I mean, and we know a lot of them will not be necessarily fulfilled. But I know that the NDC's manifesto cut across three main areas when it comes to women. So there's one around political empowerment. So a 30% quota for women in political appointments.
30%.
Yes. And as we, I think at the moment we are 21 or 26. 16 is parliament. But anyway, and then they also promised to implement the affirmative action law.
Which
which is going to be a challenge. And of course, they also said they were going to make some legal reforms by passing the Property Rights of Spouses Bill, the Domestic Workers Bill, and the Intestate Succession Amendment Bill. We're waiting for all of that. So that was political empowerment. Then they talked about economic empowerment. That's where the Women's Development Bank comes in. Yeah. They promised market enhancement programs. They also promised women in agriculture initiative, an entrepreneurship development program, and a financial inclusion program.
Right.
And then thirdly, they looked around, the manifesto also looked at health and social protection and a whole range of promises there as well. Well, in the first 100 days, or at least as of May 2025, in my calculation, I think there are 4 areas that some attempt or progress has been made. So the Affirmative Action Act, the president has reaffirmed his government's commitment, and as far as I know, only 23% of women currently hold of all appointments. Only 23% of all appointments are women, right? So I think you have the details of and then there's been some progress, a process to establish the Women's Development Bank, including
seed money.
Yes, put in some seed money. They're giving free sanitary pads to schoolgirls,
right?
And then they've kind of started the Empowerment of Women and People with Disabilities program. But that's it. In 120 days, that's it. In terms of gender representation political appointments, the president made 42 ministerial appointments.
Right.
Only 7
were female.
Were women. 13 deputy ministers, only 2 are women. I'm not quite sure how we're going to meet the 30% target for 2026, let alone the 50% target for 2030. We've talked about the low participation of women in local government, and that's a problem. And, we need a stricter enforcement of the affirmative action bill. And we need to see it, not just, the problem I have sometimes is that gender is seen as a women's problem.
Right.
Gender equality seems to be a women's problem. So we set up a gender and children's ministry, and it's sitting in the corner, and everything gender goes to them, as if men don't have a gender.
It's not an integrated.
It's not integrated
system.
The Minister of Agriculture has to have a KPI around gender parity. The Minister of Finance has to have a KPI. The Minister of Defense has to have a KPI. Every single arm of government needs to be involved in this.
Right.
They must all have KPIs from the president, and he must, in my view, conduct performance reviews of every minister. Have you achieved the targets?
Yes, for the promises.
These are your objectives.
And that's
have you achieved them in line with the national agenda?
Right.
Otherwise, we're just swimming, in the mud.
That's interesting. But the figures are so alarming.
Yes.
Doc, Bishop, you have anything to add to the manifesto?
No, I just think that there are 3 more years to go, and then we go back to elections. And I think one needs to advise themselves, because the citizens of Ghana are no longer sleeping. They're wide awake.
Right.
Their eyes are wide open, watching what's going on. And I think this is the time for women, not to just stay back, but I think there needs to be more mentoring of women into leadership, especially by those who have positions.
Yeah.
I think they have a responsibility for the next generation to bring up, mentor women in leadership, because they have walked through things that people, other women need to know how to face and how to walk those challenging pathways. Sometimes people say women are their own worst enemies, because, you know, we don't, sometimes we can be working against our own. But I suppose that's everywhere. Men work against men in politics, in business, etc. So it's not just limited to, I think it's human. It's a human thing. But I think those in positions of responsibility need to mentor other women into leadership positions, help them to deal with the confidence, the self-esteem, you know. Also, mothers and fathers need to watch how they are socializing their sons, you know, and their daughters, to make them into, you know, so that they are able to be confident in their capabilities and what they are able to do, rather than, you know, pulling back, as most women do in Ghana, because they don't want to be seen to be doing something that the men should be doing.
That's true.
But there are real structural barriers too. So it's not just about the women and the way they think. I mean, I don't know how many, probably none. I stand to be corrected because I don't have the figures on this. But I don't think there is any African country that has met the International Labour Organization's recommendation for maternity leave, 14 weeks. I think Ghana at the moment we're at 12 paid. I know the government has promised to move it to 16 weeks, I believe, but you know it hasn't happened yet. There are structural barriers. If you have only 12 weeks of paid maternity leave, that means that who's going to look after your child after 12 weeks, a 3-month-old, right? It's and it's not that child care is also taken care of by the government. So it's not like you can take your child to free childcare in order to find somebody to look after your children. There are other structural barriers. The gender pay gap in Ghana is quite wide, right? Which means that women also, if you have a couple, and one of them has to stay home because they need to look after the children, it's going to be the woman because she earns less.
Exactly.
Right? It makes economic sense.
Exactly.
That's not discrimination. That's an economic decision made by the family unit. Right? So there are structural barriers in place about, you know, a woman's place in society and what a woman can do. We don't have flexible working as a matter of policy. Right? We don't have flexible working. You know, who come to work? Who sets a work culture where work finishes at 5,
That's right,
but school finishes at 3?
At 3.
Who's going to pick the kids from school if we're all working?
That's true.
Right? Clearly, it was designed by a man who has a wife at home, who's going to pick up his kids from school. Otherwise, you know, we need to rethink the entire system and the way the system is designed, and whether that system, the societal system, supports women to be at work, rise through the ranks, to get into the decision-making spaces.
And I think with this 24-hour economy, I think this flexible working should be one of the key issues that they need to face if they are really committed to affirmative action. Then we need to put in laws and regulations that support women in careers, in professions, etc.
I have a question, but before I ask the question, let me read 1 or 2 messages and then we'll tie it in. This one says, first of all, thank you for shedding light on this important issue and bringing on board these inspiring women. I agree with them. Despite holding key positions, many women in Ghana face barriers like cultural expectations, political gatekeeping, lack of support, media bias, and fear of backlash, which often limits the visibility and impact of their leadership.
Absolutely.
We cannot pretend, but the problems are deeply embedded. Cultural and media narratives that continue to shape and often suppress the perceived impact of women in Ghana. Okay, this one says, good evening, Mr. Wilson. I'm DJ. Okay, no, let me start from here. Good evening, Mr. Wilson. In this country, traders are our problem. if dollar rises, they increase the product. But if the dollar drops, they don't want to reduce their product. Okay, why? And this is from Abladefia Kumazongo Takradi. Okay, that's your issue. This one says, Mr. Wilson, please kindly ask your two guests for me. Is it true that women are their own enemies? Or it is false? All right. Good evening, Mr. Wilson. I'm DJ Malasti from Western North. In fact, you people are doing a great job. God bless you all. All right. Hello, Mr. Wilson. Good evening. I'm really enjoying the program, Politics and Beyond. Okay, you didn't add your name. It looks like this evening no one is adding their names. The participation of women in political activism has been limited globally, particularly in Ghana. In Ghana, women's participation in politics has been low due to societal norms and cultural beliefs that limit their participation in public discourse. There's a need to wake them up. Good evening, Mr. Wilson. The mindset of people in high office is affecting women. For example, when a woman is being posted from the immediate family, like the children and husband, she finds it difficult to, okay, it's not so clear, to seek for transfer to join their, okay, not so clear, but.
Sometimes the female is the one working. Like, for example, you can have a wife in a hospital, working in a hospital in Koforidua, and the husband is working in Takoradi.
Right.
But then to get the transfer.
Okay. I get that now. I get that. That's really true. I personally have a friend who has been complaining to me about that, a female friend. I have really enjoyed the program. I believe our biological makeup alone as women will exempt us from attaining certain milestones. Nonetheless, wherever we are in our own small way, we can take up leadership positions and make impact. God bless women. I'm watching from Nkwanta, and the name is Na Anyema. Okay, good evening, Mr. Wilson. It amazes me how women have proven themselves in Ghana positively, yet they have been vilified for no reason so far, as I'm concerned. But I believe one day women will push through and take control in our dear nation, Ghana. Let me use your medium to celebrate the first woman to contest the regional youth organizer position of NDC in the Upper West region. Okay, that's the youth organizer. Mrs. Ashika Latif Khalid in the just ended regional elections, but unfortunately could not make it, but was a real fight she puts up. I wish all women well in their endeavors. And this is Muniru ARB from WA. Okay, I'll come back to the messages if there's time, but these are some of the messages that I could read for now. With all the things that have been said, the question I'm asking is this. 42 appointments made. Out of 42, we have 7 females. 13 appointments made. Out of 13, we have 2. Not to talk of the local government. That one is, that's about what, 8% or 9%. The question is very simple. Today, we have a whole vice president who is a woman. She's actually part of the appointment, unless I am proven otherwise. A woman is part of the decision making. And it ended up that we are having 7 out of 42, 2 out of 13. What level do we expect women to be before they can really make impact if a vice president is not able to influence this?
Okay. We need a woman president.
Exactly. We need somebody at the top.
Men have run the world for ever. And look at the world that we live in. Joking aside,
right.
I think where you have a lone woman in a male-dominated environment, there is only so much impact she can have. To be honest, yes, the president makes appointments, but the president doesn't sit in a room quietly by himself and just write down some names. I hope that's not what happens. I'm assuming he consults quite widely, both within the party, but also within, his political circles to come to a decision. So if you're a lone woman in that space, your influence will not be as much as if you are the decision maker, right? So I think and this happens everywhere. If we want to talk about race equality, disability equality, whatever it is, you may have one prominent
black person,
token person there, but it doesn't mean that that person has the ear or
can make decisions.
They can influence it, but they are not the eventual decision maker.
Right.
And that makes it a problem.
A problem.
And I don't know whether there is a fear
on the part of
males.
Okay.
A fear about being led by a woman. I mean, in the Bible, you read about Deborah who led Barak and his group to battle. You read about the Samaritan woman who transformed the whole city. What the men couldn't do, the 12 disciples with Jesus, they went to look for bread. She turned the city around.
That's right.
There are so many examples. You look at the Queen Esther and how she transformed the whole, delivered the whole Jewish people from Persia, in Persia. So, there are so many examples of women leaders, but it's as if the men are afraid of women. And I know professional women who come home and their husbands are like, why do you want to be the man? Because of the job that they do. And that is happening in the country.
Right.
Are you the man? Do you want to wear the shoes or the trousers or whatever? It's all about understanding people and what God has ordained or created you to be, and allowing people to express who they are.
That's right. That's right. There's even though our time is really gone, but there's an interesting one that also comes into mind now. Yes, it is difficult to have a lone ranger making an impact. But we also know that in Ghana here, in Ghana here, we also know that when we look at Ghana's population, the women are in the majority.
No, I think it's on par. I'll tell you right now.
It's 51%.
51%.
Yes,
and men,
and
men make up 49%. But let me tell you something.
Yes.
And I think it's important that I
make that point.
Make a very the idea that somehow in Africa or in other parts of the world we have 7 women to 1 man is not true. The saying about women hold up half the sky is because women make up approximately 50% of the world.
That's it.
God designed the world so there would be 1 man to 1 woman. Please. It is not true. In Ghana, it's 51.3 or something percent are women and 49.7 are men, something like that.
So then can we...
It's a myth.
I get
it's
it.
a myth.
So can we again say that women are their own enemies? Is it true? Because you see, if we have, even if it is 50-50, and we have a woman holding a very important position as the vice president, and even if she's not able to get all the 50% of women rallying behind her, and she's even able to get like 30 or 40%, even though she's lone up there, because of the backing she has, whatever she says when it comes to decision making will be taken.
That's the point.
The point is, where are these women sitting in terms of their capacity to influence? You have to ask yourself that question. How many women, as you go through the education cycle, as women go up through tertiary education, the numbers of the women fall. Right? So education is an issue. Financial ability is an issue. Women's health is an issue. When I have walked 7 miles to fetch water, to come back to my husband, who is lying down on a mat in the hut, He's stronger than I am.
Right.
But I have to walk 7 miles because I'm a woman. I come, cook, clean. This is after I've been on the farm.
That's right.
What time do I have to engage in village politics?
Okay. That's fair. That's really fair. That's really fair. I will come to you just to wrap up, both of you. In less than a minute or two, you just give us the way forward. Let me just read this one or two quick messages. This one says, good evening, Mr. Wilson. The current government headed by His Excellency John Mahama must be very careful on the measure taken in curbing for illegal mining, because if case, okay, so illegal mining, we'll talk about it some other time. But thank you so much, Abu, from teacher Abu. Your name is, okay. This one says that, no, in fact, your name is Kofi Bente Afu from teacher Abu in Sefi Buakon. All right. Good evening, Mr. Wilson. Thanks to your panelists. Something is going on in Ghana that scholars and researchers have not seen yet. Now, girls are schools and boys. Okay, girls are in schools and boys are in the pit doing galamsey. Some are also dying there. So now gender equality campaign should focus on the boys too. Okay, so this is it. There are a number of messages, but unfortunately, my producer is not able to give me additional time. But I mean, this is it. So straight, let's sum up our conversations. I'll start with you, Dr. Forsen.
So a lot of progress has been made, and we think, you know, if I look at my Mother's Day and I look at where we are now and where, you know, projected we're going, we're on the right path. And I think the journey, the direction of travel is a good one, right? But we have a lot of work to do. And in particular, we need to ensure that any legislation in place, whether it's the constitutional provisions on equality and anti-discrimination, whether it's the Affirmative Action Bill or any Affirmative Action Act, or any other laws that need to be passed in order to empower women within the society. One, we need to do it. And two, we need to enforce the laws that already exist.
Very important.
Right? We need a political will, a change of attitude within our society. And to be honest, we also need male allies. We need men who will advocate for women, because gender equality can never be attained without men.
That's right.
In the same way as we cannot attain racial equality without white people, we can't attain disability equality without, you know, able-bodied people. So we all need to be in this together.
That's true.
The leader of the government, the leader of Ghana, needs to set an example and be a role model. And so in those 42 appointments, something needs to be done.
Very true. Thank you so much. Bishop, Doctor.
Yes, so I'll round up by saying that we need to make sure that there are more women in the executive of the political parties, because we were talking about the capacity of those in leadership to make the right decisions in terms of gender.
Right.
But if you are surrounded by 10 men, you will see it from a male perspective. You need, if you had 5 women and 5 men in the executive or in the cabinet, it will change the way that you perceive and you think about things, because you will have different influences rather than a predominantly male one. So we need women in the executive of the government, in the executive of the political parties. We need women in key positions in local government, etc. We also need to have mentoring for women into leadership. So mentoring leaders, the challenges that they will face, what they need to go through, how they need to deal with situations and challenges that are faced, like a coach, someone who will help them. And there are so many of these coaching agencies in the States, in Europe, etc., where they train people how to, the the skills that they need in navigating political and leadership positions. So we need that. And then also we need to look at the legal framework and structures to support women. We talked about the Affirmative Action Act. We talked about flexible working. You know, I remember when I was having children in the UK for 6 years as a mother, you don't need to work. They would support you. But obviously it changed. But that was something that supported women and helped women to be part of the society and not look down because, you know, they were looking after children, because it's what we teach the children that develops them into who they become, and what they have become is what we have now in our culture and in our society. And is this the kind of attitude and cultural norms that we want to have? And then also we need to look at political funding, encourage the girl child, you know, into school, into aiming higher, into achieving, into being ambitious, encouraging them. Having to achieve is not a negative. To be, you know, to want to be outside of the kitchen is not a negative. So we need some balance.
I get it. I get it. In fact, I'm so quiet because I'm really enjoying the program, and I don't know about you, the viewer, but if we look at the feedbacks that have come so far, the messages, unfortunately, I'm not able to read further messages, but all the messages that have come, we appreciate it so much. Mr. Patrick Ashford Buedu, who is the convener for Young Progressive Network, thank you so much for doing the viewing, and even from afar, I know how you've been contributing to this program to make it a success. Patrick, I appreciate so much. Masaudu, who is in Akwitia, you're also doing the viewing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. All too soon, this is where time will allow us. I think what we can do is, if it pleases my guests, we will want to have another platform in the very, very near future to discuss, you know, probably a different angle as far as gender participation in democratic governance is concerned, because it is very, very, very important. And you won't get it on any other platform other than Politics and Beyond. I want to also say that we are your friends. You were looking for male allies to be part of this whole process. I mean, this platform is open, and anything that will, you know, ensure that we have gender parity. I personally believe that when women lead, there are a lot of wonders that takes place. I personally believe so. And my viewers, look, for the first time, see how beautiful the set looks with flowers. It's because of the ladies. They came and decided to make a change to it. They said, we want flowers. I mean, that tells you wherever they are, there's an impact that is made and that is felt. And so on behalf of all of you, I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia Forsen. Thank you so much, Bishop Dr. Susan Inti. We really appreciate your time. This is where time will allow us to meet again next week. All I can say for now is good night.